Hi, welcome to another video. My name is Sam Gabriel, and in this video we're going to look at a Terraform Cloud Alternative called env0. This video is sponsored by env0, so thank you env0 for that, and why don't we get started. Okay, so the agenda for today, we are going to look at tacos. And tacos stand for Terraform Automation and Collaboration Software. So we're going to see why use tacos over regular open source Terraform. Then we're going to take a look at env0 with a demo. In this demo, we're going to discuss the structure overview of env0, focusing on organizations, projects, templates, and environments. Then we're going to take a look at RBAC. Then we're going to look at how to create a Jenkins container inside of an EC2 instance by combining Terraform with Ansible, all that in a custom workflow inside of env0. And finally, we're going to take a look at the automatic destruction mechanism that can be created inside of env0, which I find very interesting with a time to live. So in my case here, in this use case where I want to generate a Jenkins machine very quickly whenever I want to test something, but I don't want to forget about this machine, and env0 will help me destroy this machine in 6 hours or 1 day or a few days or a week and so on, so I don't forget my resources running if I'm just running them for testing purposes. Okay, so tacos, and why not just use open source Terraform? You might have heard me talk about this before, but as you're scaling Terraform in an organization, you're no longer running Terraform with maybe one person, two people, or just a small team in an organization. Now you're scaling Terraform for multiple users to use it. So at this point, you want to move to a software that is either managed on your behalf as a SaaS offering or an on-prem offering, or using agents that env0, for example, offers, so you can run provisioning in your local environment and talks back to the SaaS environment, so you don't have to open firewalls inbound. You also, of course, want to secure your remote state. So in that case, you need a piece of software that allows you to store state remotely, and you don't have to worry about state files living on developers' workstations and so on. Secrets and variables, you want to manage those securely. You need to have a robust RBAC. You don't want one team stepping on the toes of another team and accessing certain environments that you don't want them to access. Single sign-on, of course. Policy as code for governance. Again, as you're standardizing on Terraform for the whole organization, the security team might have some certain policies that they want to put in place. If you want to go down the road of self-service for the environment, you want to make sure that you have guardrails in place. So policy as code is very important. A private module registry, so you can store your Terraform modules for your organization privately. Cost estimation is also very helpful, so you know how much it's going to cost you to deploy certain resources. And automatic drift detection. So that is something that you also want to take a look at, because with open source, if somebody makes changes, let's say in the AWS console, there's no way to find out that drift happened unless you run another apply or a refresh, and somebody has to run that. But with a SaaS offering like env0, for example, you'll be able to have this automatic drift detection with notifications to tell you, hey, somebody has done something, or there's some sort of drift in your environment, you better go and take a quick look. So that is also something that it's important to have when you're moving away from open source. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at a demo of env0. So you can go ahead and start a free trial. That's what I did. And it's funny because it's taken me about 6-7 hours without knowing anything about env0 to what I'm going to show you in this demo. So the documentation is pretty good, and I was able to figure things out. The layout is very nice in the UI as well. So as you can see here, once you're logged in, at the bottom here you have organizations. You can create organizations, and if you click here, it tells you that organizations allow you to invite users to share your templates and environments. So we got to figure out what templates and environments are. So that's what we're going to do. So before we talk about templates and environments, there is a construct called projects. So if you click on projects here, it tells you that projects are used to provide granular access to environments. Every environment in env0 exists under a project, and users are given access on a per project basis. So the recommendation from env0 is to have a project per environment. So you'd have, for example, a project for dev, a project for prod, a project for test, QA, and so on. Because at that point you can assign, from an RBAC perspective, access to these environments under those projects. Now, the documentation is very helpful as well, and you can see how it's laid out. You can see on the left-hand side, you can look at organization. What is an organization? Projects. What are projects? And you can take a closer look at templates and so on. So definitely worth taking a look at the documentation. Now let's go back and see what we have here. Projects, I have a project that I created here, Jenkins in AWS. Of course, you can create new projects from here. It's very simple. And now that we're in this project, you can see on the left-hand side that you can create a new environment inside this project. And this environment can be created by directly tying it into a version control system, or by creating the environment through a template. And this is what we're going to do, and I'll show you why in just a little bit. So to create a template, you can create templates here at the organization level. And the neat thing about templates is that you can launch multiple environments under different projects for the same template. So as a super user, or an admin user, I should say, in env0, you have the ability to create these templates. And then when you have other users in the environment, such as a planner or deployer, they will not have access to create those templates, but they can use those templates. So from a self-service perspective, from a governance perspective, this is very helpful, because then you would have those templates ready to be used by different development teams, for example, that you don't want to give them access to create those templates, to kind of put the guardrails in place. Let's go ahead and create a new template. And one differentiator here for env0 is that you can create templates based on different types, such as just a Terraform template, or even TerraGrunt, Pulumi, Kubernetes, CloudFormation, or custom workflows. For us, we're going to run Terraform, so I'm going to use this template name, Jenkins container in EC2, give it a description. Let's say running Jenkins in EC2 inside a Docker container. Okay, now the advanced functions here, you can specify a particular Terraform version, or I'm just going to use the latest. And let's click next. And now you can tie this template into a version control system. So the template lives in VCS. In my case, it lives in GitLab. And I've already tied GitLab with env0, so I can select my user and also the repo. So it's pulling all the repos that I have here, and this is the repo that I have for this template. You can specify a branch. Maybe you have a dev branch or a main branch. In this case, I'm going to use the main branch. You can also specify the Terraform folder where your Terraform files live. In this case, they live in the root, so I'm not going to specify a folder. All right, and this is really neat with env0. I really like this. When you're defining variables, you can say load variables from code. And what it's going to do, it's going to look through your Terraform code and load all the variables for you right here. And it's going to take all the defaults that you've specified in your variable definitions. You can see everything here is default, looks good. This one I didn't specify default, so that's why it's empty. I'm just going to add it here and click next. You can also add environment variables, and I didn't mention this, but any of these can be also sensitive variables if you wish. And also, if you hover over the eye icon here, the info icon, it gives you the description of this particular variable that was loaded from the variables from your code. It's worth noting that you can add other types of variables. I like this one here, the drop-down list. In this case, you can actually specify particular options that you want your users to choose from this list, so they can't just write anything in this variable. Again, it's from a guardrails perspective, this is also helpful. So let's go ahead and click next. And as you can see here, we specify a template and attach this template or make it available to particular projects. You can select all the projects here or none. In this case, I want to associate this template with this project, so I can choose it when I'm inside this project. And all you need to do is click done. Okay. Template Jenkins container is successfully created. All right, I can create a new environment, but I want to show you how to do it from here. So if we go to our project environments, you can now create a new environment. And it's going to ask you again, VCS or template. So we're going to choose template. And here's our template, so we can click run now. Okay, so we can specify a name for the workspace, and this uses the regular Terraform workspaces under the hood. So let's give it a name, call it maybe Jenkins. If you don't give it a name, env0 will create a workspace for you. Here you can specify drift detection by using a cron job. The minimum is every hour, so it's going to check for drift every hour. You can also destroy an environment here. In this case, I have an automatic destroy after 6 hours, which is really, really neat. I talked about the use case of creating these environments and then forgetting about them and forgetting to destroy them, so this can destroy it for you automatically. And also the variables have been defined in the template, and they're just ported over into the project right here. Okay, so we can go ahead and run this, but I'm not going to do that because I am the super user. So what I want to show you before I run this is that I have another user who's a developer. So if we go to settings and we go to teams, I have a dev team, and this dev team has this user, which is also me, under a different username. Okay, and as you can see under users, we only have 2 users, and this user is a role regular user as opposed to the admin user. So just look at the top right here, you're going to see that this is the super user with this blue background, and this one with my wife and I in it is the developer user, if you will. So let me switch over to the developer user. Okay, so I am now here the developer, and if you notice the difference, the developer has no longer the project settings here and has no longer the organization settings. And also, if you notice going to templates, there is no button to create a template for this particular user. And the role of this user is planner. Okay, so a planner has the ability to generate an environment and run Terraform code, but this person can't actually approve the Terraform run. And this is by design, so you want a user that is of higher role, so either an admin user or a deployer. They call them a deployer in env0 to be able to access that. Okay, so let me go back and look at my project environments, and I can create a new environment as we saw before, but now we're doing it from the developer user. So let's go ahead and Actually, let's refresh this because I had deleted the template before. So there's only one template here, that's right. So let's run now. So we're going to create this template. And once again, you can see that from this view, we actually don't have the ability to redeploy on every push or even specify drift detection. For this particular role, that's not available. So let's go ahead and see what else we're not allowed to do. By default, the destroy in 6 hours. Also, this is not something we can do. Variables, we can make changes to our variables, so that is nice. So let's go ahead and run. Okay, now I've tied this into Slack, so we see a Slack notification. Let's go into Slack and take a quick look. It tells me deploy started from template by Sam Gabriel on main. So this is cool. I can just click on it here and it can bring me right here to exactly the deployment log where I'm deploying this. And as we can see that this type of deploy is in progress. Jenkins container EC2, that's the template we're running. And there are a few things that are going on in this deployment logs. You can see the git clone. So it's cloning from Git, from the GitLab repository, getting a working directory, loading variables, loading my env0 YAML file. We're going to talk about this in just a little bit. This is the ability to run Ansible after Terraform is complete to get, from a configuration perspective, get everything ready to be deployed, to be able to get Jenkins running inside of a container, which is very, very neat because now I don't really need to rely on an external CI/CD pipeline. This can all be done within env0. Loading variables, setting Terraform version, running Terraform init, see that's successful, setting Terraform workspace, so the new workspace now is Jenkins as we defined it, tagging resources. Here's the Terraform plan, as you would expect. Terraform plan is running. It's going to create 11 resources. You can view this in a different kind of format, like that. So if you want to see, for example, the public IP will be computed. You can't see it right now. But what's important here is the approve button is grayed out because I don't have privileges to approve this particular run. So if I go back into my other user here, okay, the admin user. If we go back to Slack, actually, you can see that the deploy started by Sam, but it needs an approval, and it gives you even the cost estimation is $12.92. So if I go back here and take a look at the project environments, and you can see it's waiting for approval. Let's review it. And it takes me right to the approval button. Okay, so assume that everything is good. I'm happy with it. I'm going to go ahead and approve this. And also, I can see the cost estimation right here as well. And it breaks it down. So it shows me that the Elastic IP is $3.65 if the IP address is used. AWS instance, it cost me about $9 for T2 micro, also for storage blocks and so on. So very cool. And let's say I'm happy with all this. I'm going to approve it. Automatically got a notification from Slack. Deploy approved by Sam Gabriel, which is the super user again. And it's going to go ahead and run. So let's go back in here. And while this continues to run, let me show you around a little bit more here. So if we go to the settings, under credentials, you can put in your AWS credentials. You could put in your GCP credentials, any kind of cloud really. So you got AWS assumed role you can use, or AWS access keys, GCP service account, or an Azure service principal. You can use any of these. You can also do that for cost estimation. So you can add your credentials for cost estimation that way as well. And of course, as you'd expect from any modern SaaS providers that they have an API that you can interact with and create your API keys here. Policies, which is very cool. Here is where you can define the maximum environment time to live. You can define this under the organization level or under a project. And the default, okay? So the maximum TTL and the default TTL. In this case, I'm leaving it as infinite. SSH keys, notifications. This is where I've tied this into Slack for notifications. And then agents. In this case, if you want to run workloads inside, let's say, VMware in a closed environment or a private VPC, that you don't have access out to the inbound, you don't want to open firewalls inbound, you can run those agents that will talk to env0's SaaS offering. So that is also available. And it goes without saying that there's obviously a private module registry. You can create new modules in here and reference those modules in your Terraform code. And under project, you can see the project settings as well. You can verify, or you can run credentials directly here from the project, which will pull from the global credentials. Policies, same thing as I mentioned before. You can add cost estimation. What I mentioned before was the TTL. Here I'm specifying it per project. So 3 days is the maximum environment TTL. The default is 6 hours. Okay. And notifications is similar to what we saw before, the Slack notifications. And one more thing, from a variables perspective, you can define the variables globally here under the organization that you can pull later into different projects, if you will. Now let's go back and see how far we've gone with the deployment. We still see deployment in progress. And it's in a state called after Terraform output, which is very, very cool when it comes to env0 allowing you to create hooks. So in this case, I have a hook. After Terraform runs Terraform output, it's going to go ahead and do a few things that I've specified in that env0 YAML file. And if we look at this really quickly, you'll see that it's running Terraform output. Let's pause the scrolling here for a second. It's running Terraform output, grabbing the private key, because in Terraform we're just running or we're deploying an EC2 instance in a VPC, and I can get more granular and get really into the Terraform code. But for now, we're running we're creating an EC2 instance, and we need the private key for this EC2 instance so that we can access it for Ansible. So we're grabbing the actual private key, we're putting it in this temp file, calling mykey.pem, changing the mod for this so we can use it as a private key. And then we're grabbing, or we're placing, the Terraform public IP inside the inventory file for Ansible so that Ansible can go ahead and access this by that IP. And then we're installing Ansible actually right here inside this agent, because this agent doesn't have Ansible. I'm running an ls just to kind of see what's inside this folder. You can see my Ansible folder here, and inside of that you'll have the inventory file and the playbook. And then I'm looking at the Ansible inventory file. You can see that it dropped the public IP address of my EC2 instance so I can access it. And then I am going into the Ansible folder and running Ansible playbook with that private key that is stored, and with the inventory file, which is with the inventory file called inventory and the playbook called Jenkins playbook. So the Jenkins playbook is actually running, as you can see. We're installing pip3 and unzip, adding Docker GPG. So we're actually installing Docker into this EC2 instance. Add the Docker repository, update apt, and install Docker CE. Install Docker module for, and it cut me off because it's probably complete. Let's just go back and Double check, deploy completed successfully. Okay, so that's why. But let's just continue our logs here. So back to our logs. Terraform after Terraform output. Once again, and as you can see, we're installing Docker CE, install the Docker module for Python, pull the Jenkins Docker image, change file ownership, create Jenkins container, and this is complete. So with that IP address that we just saw here, we should be able to copy that, or we could also go from the deployment resources. We can see the outputs, the public IP, you can get it from here, copy that, and open a new tab. Jenkins should be running on port 8080. So if you run that, and just give it a second or two to load, and drum roll please. Here we go. Jenkins is up and running, ready to go, and I can go ahead and use this Jenkins machine for whatever testing that I need, knowing that in 6 hours this will get destroyed. And if you go back to my environment right here, you see that the clock started ticking for this deployment for the 6 hours, right? So I can go ahead in here and specify a particular time when I want to destroy it. I'm going to go back and say, hey, I actually want this machine, so put the destroy time as unlimited, or destroy after, let's say, extend this to 1 day or something like that. Okay, so this is really neat. Once again, the deployment logs are right here. If I want to go back and take a closer look, all my variables, deployments. To get this to work, of course, I had multiple errors and multiple issues, so all the failed deployments will show up here. Hourly cost, this takes a little bit of time to run, so you won't really show anything right here. And then finally, settings that we saw before that you can see in here. So that pretty much sums up the demo of how we've used env0 to use Terraform and then use Ansible to create this Jenkins machine. If you're interested in the actual code, I will have it available. You can take a look at it, and it is right here. So it's pretty simple. We just have an Ansible folder. In that Ansible folder, we have the playbook right here, and of course there's the main.tf file for Terraform that's running or creating that EC2 instance, creating a VPC, creating a subnet, creating a routing table, and all that good stuff in AWS to get this EC2 off the ground. The outputs that we saw before and the variables file. One thing I'm just going to go over again really quickly is this env0, which makes all this env0.yaml, which makes all this magic happen. If you're familiar with GitLab, CI/CD, or GitHub Actions, this will come at no surprise to you, where we're running a deploy steps, and then after the Terraform output, we have an after hook, and this hook is where we're running the different commands that we saw earlier in the logs. As you can see, all we're doing is passing over, creating this private key from Terraform, changing the mods here, the permissions on the file, and putting in the IP address in the Ansible inventory file, installing Ansible, and then finally running the playbook. So really, env0 gives you a lot of flexibility when it comes to running, whether you're running Terraform or running TerraGrunt, or running with Kubernetes as an infrastructure as code environment, and also tying in a configuration management tool like Ansible to give you that flexibility in your deployments, and you don't have to look for an external CI/CD pipeline. You can really integrate everything in here. Now, the last thing I promise is just to make sure I covered all the features here. You can see from the pricing plan on env0.com/pricing at the time of this recording, some of the features that are really cool. Of course, RBAC we talked about. Custom flows is what we just mentioned in terms of adding Ansible to Terraform. Full API integrations, of course, private module registry. I didn't touch a lot about or talk a lot about OPA, but this is really, really key in that it is using, env0 is using Open Policy Agent, which is now becoming an industry standard when it comes to policy as code. So it uses that, and you can integrate that in your flows to put those guardrails in place when you're running when you're running environments where you have developers running with their environments in a self-service kind of manner, as opposed to running tickets and slowing down development. Of course, you have cost estimation, automatic drift detection, we saw that, dashboards dashboards that give you really good insights into who is deploying what, Slack notification, team notification, environment ETL and scheduling, which is really cool, tagging, and also cost monitoring, which is unique to env0 in my opinion. It's not just giving the cost estimation at the beginning, but it actually monitors your cost over time as well. And then of course SAML integration, which allows you to have single sign-on as well, and the self-hosted agents that we talked about. And that pretty much sums up this video on env0, on the different features that it has. So great work by the env0 team. Very happy to see the work that they've done. And once again, thanks for their sponsorship. If you like this video, go ahead and like it, subscribe to it so you can see more videos like this one. And I will catch you in another video.